Hello everyone, welcome to Methods 2 Week 11. Similar to what we talked about in class, we will be going over how to use Rhino, Illustrator, Photoshop, Inkscape, and InDesign. So we're going to be taking line work from Rhino and the renderings from Inkscape and post-processing both of those elements in Photoshop and Illustrator to get the appropriate line weights as well as setting ourselves up a file that we can further edit with Photoshop in the next assignment. So what I have here in Rhino is just a simple stepped pyramid. If I go back to my shaded, you can see that they're all made of individual blocks. This is slightly different than what we did in class, but still the same logic. First, we're going to set up a custom view, and I'm just going to do this one here. So we can go to Set View, Named Views. We can also get here by just typing Named Views as a command. And then if we click Save As, it's going to prompt us with a name. And now whenever we change our view, if we always go back to that first view, that first saved view, we always return here, which is crucial. That being said, I still am having trouble accessing Inkscape on my computer. So whenever you make these views, make sure that in your Inkscape tab, you're synchronizing those views in Rhino. So you go to your Inkscape toolbar, you need to make sure that the pause and resume view synchronization is active. It should say synchronize views true. So once that's good, if you go to Inkscape and you go back to your Rhino and redo your view, your Inkscape will synchronize with your current Rhino view. That is necessary because whenever we're taking the line work and the render from Inkscape, if they're not taken from the exact same view, then they will never match up and line up properly when we start to post-process and combine all these elements together. So talking about line weights, let's go ahead and make 2D. Again, we can check all these that we need to. If we're doing clipping planes, we want to make sure that our clipping plane is turned on. Everything else seems okay. I'm just going to click OK. And remember, every time we do make 2D, it's going to put the line work in the top view. So now that we have our line work, we can select it, and we can go to File, Export Selected. I'm just going to save it to my downloads, but you should be saving this to your OneDrive. That way you have it everywhere. Make sure when you're saving it, though, you save it as a Illustrator file. It's going to ask you what scale you want it. When we're doing more technical drawings that have a scale, like for instance, 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot, that's when we want to preserve model scale. But for now, we're just going to do snapshot because it's scaleless. Let's just go ahead and click OK. Now what we can do is go and open that in our Illustrator. So when you open Illustrator, it will give you a little welcome as well as anything recent that you've been working on. We can go to Open, go to Find our Illustrator file. And there it is. It's kind of small. What we can do is scale it up. Is if you just highlight everything by dragging and clicking, right? Drag, click. Well, click and drag, I should say. It will highlight everything. And we see that the same shape handles that are shown in InDesign are also shown here. There's going to be some similarities between this program, Photoshop, and InDesign because they're all part of the same Adobe suite. So that might be a little bit more, a little easier for you, everyone to grasp. So in order to stretch this or scale this, we can drag this shape handle, but we can see that now it's losing its proportion, which we need to maintain to match with our image. So what we can do is hold Shift, and we'll maintain those proportions. Okay. Now what we can do is start to manipulate the line weights and everything like that. So in the right hand side, we can see the appearance of this line. Similar to Rhino, Illustrator is working with these lines, which we call paths. One thing about it is similar to, or referencing back to the presentation I gave, Illustrator is only working with vector elements. So no matter how big we scale this, it's going to maintain its quality because it's a vector and not a rasterized image. So if I select this element, and we can see that we can change the stroke. Stroke in this instance is the line weight or line type, line color, it's everything. So we can change the color, and we can change the line thickness, which is by points. So now we see it's a 6-point thick line that's now green. There's also something to do with layers, which is more useful whenever you have more layers from Rhino and you maintain those source layers. It will maintain all those sources. Right now, since I only have one layer, it's showing me all the lines in that layer. In order to select everything on a layer, you can select this little circle, and it'll select everything on that layer. Similar to Rhino, you can also hide layers, as well as lock them to not edit them further. When talking about selecting, right now what we're doing is just selecting the elements themselves and being able to scale or move them. But if we were to do this direct selection over here at the left, which is the white filled arrow, if we were to now select a path, we see that now 2 points have popped up, which are the anchor points. These can be edited to however you want to kind of clean up your drawing. We can also add more anchor points if we were to go to the pen tool. If we hover on that, we can add another point. We can add as many as we want. If we use the anchor point tool, which all I did was click Shift on the pen because there's that little arrow, so we know there's more stuff there. If we use the anchor point tool, we can now start editing these anchor points and make them curves. If you go back to our deluxe selection, we can move these anchor points around. Now we've edited that original line. Another thing that we can do with anchors is if I go to my window or view, I need to go to my toolbars. Yeah, there it is. Basic, advanced. And you can play around with this similar to Rhino as well. workspace, Essential Classic, just so I have this other additional toolbar up here. We can select this anchor point and we can actually trim it or cut along that anchor. And now if we were to move this line, you see that it's now trimmed at that anchor point, which could be useful for cleaning up some of your drawings when you import them from Rhino to Illustrator. You can also just draw a line with the line tool. Just want to redraw that line there. What else can we do? We can draw shapes, or we can freeform a shape with the pen tool. When we have closed line work like this, we can use fill, actually give it a colored hatch. We can also draw with the fill. We don't need to draw with an actual line color or line thickness. We can see how that is changing. And again, similar to the lines, these can be edited and moved however you want. All right. Now that we have that done, we can kind of start to talk about selecting. Let's undo that real quick. So when we want to select things, we can go to select and we can do same. This is, for instance, if you only want to select objects that have, for instance, maybe this black stroke color. Not everything that has a black stroke color has been selected. But maybe we want everything that has this burgundy fill color. If we go to select, same, fill color, now everything that has this fill color has been selected. Do the same thing for line weights. We want everything to be the same line weight as this selected. Stroke weight, everything that has this stroke weight has been selected. Okay. Last thing we can do is just quickly create the line weights that should look fine for this. All I'm doing is shift and selecting to select multiple elements. Maybe I want the stroke to be, let's say 4 is fine. Let's make it all black again. And we know that these elements here are the closest. So they'll be a little bit thicker. These elements back here are the furthest away, so it'll be thinner. Same thing for these. Well, we can leave those on 1. But these can go down to 0.5. They should also be changed to 2. Okay, there we go. Now our line weights are kind of reading to where we see this depth, right? This arrow here in the front is the darkest, it's closest to us, while this at the top is the lightest because it's furthest away. We've also dedicated an outline. Maybe I'm thinking that might be a little bit too dark now in accordance to everything else. So we can select everything with that weight, and we can easily change them all together. Maybe 3 is a little bit better. Okay. That's about it for editing line weights. Now we can save this, just as we're going to save over the original. Okay. Now, because I don't have Inkscape, I'm just going to use just a screenshot of my Arctic mode, which is going to be, similar enough for everyone to understand, but as I showed in class, you want to make sure that you have your materials all assigned, even if they don't have a color. They can be your white Inkscape material, just separate according to what material is what. Like if something's concrete versus wood, it should have its own unique material. Also need to make sure that when you're exporting your images from Inkscape or screenshotting them, make sure that you have your material ID, your alpha channel selected, all of that. I'm just going to do transparent background for my PNG here. Rename it. And now I go to Photoshop, I can open those files. I can either click open like this and open them all separately, right? Or, because you'll be importing like 5 images all together that are the exact same proportion as well as location, you can actually go to script and go to load files into stack. Now what that will do is prompt you with this display or this dialog box. And now what you would do is, for instance, you would just select all your images. These are just random images right now. But you select all of those. And it would open all of those images. I'm just going to do it real quick, even if I don't really know what I'm opening. It will open all those images and place them on top of each other. Right now, since they're not the same size or anything like that, they are just here. But if you had the same size, same proportions, everything, it would all line up perfectly. So I'm just going to close this real quick and go back to here. So now that we have our image in here, I'm just going to create another layer for the background. Have our image. It's a little grainy, but that's just because it's from the Rhino screenshot. If we go ahead and we can do it one of 2 ways. We can either drag our Illustrator file in here. We'll open it as a smart object, which means a vector object. We can see that it's a vector object because when we move over here to the layer name, which same thing as Illustrator and Rhino, Photoshop works in layers. We see if we click this, it's an embedded smart object. That means no matter the size that this object is, it will always maintain its graphic quality. Versus if we were to edit or open it directly into here and copy and paste it, now it is no longer a smart object. It's also a little larger because this is the actual quality of those lines in Illustrator. So either way is fine. If you want to maintain the quality, I would recommend opening it by either Uh, Placing the linked object or just dragging it in was fine as well. Either way will give you a nice result. I'm just going to work with my vector right now. As default, Photoshop may have this auto select turned on, which will select anything that it clicks, which could be hard for something like the line work, right? So we can turn that auto select off. And when we're looking at our layers over here, we want to make sure that the layer that we want to interact with is highlighted. So right now my line work is highlighted. Again, we can also lock layers. Maybe I want to lock these two layers down here by pressing this lock button. We can create new layers with the plus, and we can even create groups similar to like what Rhino does. One important thing about Photoshop is the layers dictate what is visible. Okay? What that means is if this white layer was actually on top of our rendering, we'd only see the white layer because it's fully opaque. Everything underneath it is obscured. So we want to put that down at the bottom, or we can actually change the opacity of some layers with this tool here. And the checkerboard that we see here just means it's transparent. It means there's nothing there. Just a visual indicator for ourselves. So in order to make this line work the same scale or same size as our rendering, what we can do is do Control T, which is transform, or which is the shortcut for transform, or we can just go to transform here and go to scale. Same thing. And now, unlike Illustrator, it's going to maintain those proportions. We don't need to hold shift. If we were to hold shift, it would disable that lock, which we can see up here. It's linked right now, the proportions are linked, but if we were to hold shift, that now disappears, and now it's no longer linked. But we want to keep it linked. So I'm just going to make this the right size. This is the tedious part, like I talked about in class. Just want to make sure it's the right size as our image. That looks pretty good. Now you can see that now our rendering has line weights. And that is all that we need to do for this part of the assignment. We just needed to bring our image, which should be like 4 or 5 images, I believe, as well as put our line weights on top of our image. So, but if our line weights were below, we wouldn't see that, right? So if they're above, we see the line weights on top of the rendering. And the next part of this assignment, we'll be taking these Photoshop layers that you already have, which, you know, are the alpha mask and the object IDs and material ID layers. And we actually will be using those to apply material as well as create different rendering styles, such as those textured and collage style that I talked about in class. So now all that we need to do is just save this as an image, drop that into our InDesign continuous file, right? At the end of the semester, we will be submitting all the work that we've done in this InDesign file as one PDF. So currently, your InDesign file, I believe, has 6 pages. With this assignment, it will increase to 8. You don't have to submit all 8 pages for this assignment submission, but you do need to submit those 2 new pages. Okay? that is everything for this moment. So again, apologies that my Inkscape is not working properly. But again, I think everyone understands Inkscape at this point, especially since I went over in class as well. You just need to make sure that your views are synchronized. That way they line up with your line work. Okay. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend and see y'all in class on Tuesday. Bye.